Welcome to Mind and Magic, where we demystify magic and the occult and talk about all things esoteric. Today we're going to discuss what to do when we're under spiritual harassment. So let's get into it.
Are you sure about that?
All right, Brendan writes in, "Good morning. I just saw your Laws of Magic video about the elements and you spoke of closing doors. I have had some kind of entity harassing me since I played with a Ouija board when I was 13. I am now 22. This is actually the literal reason that I got into magic, but I still haven't been able to make it leave. I have done your uncrossing literally 9 times now. Well, it's not my uncrossing. It's not like I made it up. It's been around for ages and it is quite effective." He continues, "I've done your uncrossing literally 9 times now, ridiculous amounts of uncrossing candles. The candles are secondary to the bath. The bath is the most important part. The candles are important too, but instead of ridiculous amounts of uncrossing candles, it should be ridiculous amounts of hyssop baths. And they brought me to the Catholic Church for exorcism prayer. These exorcisms piss it off really bad, and sometimes it seems to leave for a few hours, but it keeps coming back. And the uncrossing rituals should have the same effect, because that's what an uncrossing is. It's a type of exorcism that is designed to get rid of things that are attached to you. And that's why completely submerging yourself in a hyssop bath is so important. These things are parasites, and it's very much like getting rid of lice. They have delousing solutions you could put in a bath that kill them off. Well, that solution for spirits is hyssop. You put the hyssop in a bath, the spirit ain't going to want to remain attached to you, especially when you're reciting the Psalms on top of it. Now, you say you've done the uncrossing 9 times, but 9 times may not be enough, because you're supposed to do it for 7 days in a row at least, and can be up to 13. There is a 13-day uncrossing ritual as well. So if your 9 times wasn't in a row and it was split up as you doing it one week and, well, that didn't work and I'll do one another week or another day down the line instead of in a row like they're supposed to be done before dawn on the correct day, which if you're trying to get rid of an entity would be Sunday, then it may not have the intended effect. The uncrossing is one of those rituals where procedure does matter. You're not just going to burn some candles and take a bath and everything's fine. You have to do it for the specified amount of time, at the specified time, reciting Psalms 51, air dry instead of towel dry, apply the uncrossing oil from the feet up, while standing in the gateway of the votive candles that you have on the floor in the bathroom. There are quite a few parts to this. I had somebody else saying that the uncrossing wasn't working for them also, but when I hear that, it's usually that they didn't do it long enough or they didn't start it at the right time. There's something that they're missing. He says, "And if you think that I'm lusting for results, I'm not. Ha ha." That really wouldn't matter with an uncrossing so much, because like I said, what you're doing is you're ridding yourself of a parasite. You're not trying to manifest anything. You're trying to get rid of a being that's harassing you. So it's a different thing altogether. He says, "This thing barely even bothers me anymore. It was scary and shitty for the first 4 years, but now it literally just feels like another part of my life. And I've noticed as I rise in the grades that this thing has probably been manifesting a lot of bad into my life, so I just kind of want it gone." Anyways, I was wondering if after all this, my issue isn't that I only need an exorcism, but if I also need to close a door that is wide open now. Could you instruct me on some very powerful door closing techniques? I don't know if I would consider the techniques powerful. Closing a door isn't any more difficult than opening one. It's the same thing, but just in reverse. It's just that people forget to do it, and that's how they get into trouble. So when it comes to the Ouija board, which I don't recommend using, by the way, because things like what happened to Brendan here can happen. You just got to make sure that you end on goodbye and say goodbye and dismiss them. And that's it, really. You just don't end the session in the middle of communicating with them when they haven't gone back to where they need to go. You have to say goodbye to them and send them back. Now, when it comes to magic and casting your circle, you want to close and seal your circle when you're finished by doing the exact opposite of what you did when you cast it. So, as you may know already, my circle in my temple is semi-permanent, meaning I have it down all the time. It's painted on a painter's drop canvas. I can move it if it needs to be moved, but for the most part, it stays where it is. So when I'm casting the circle, I trace around the circle with my wand while visualizing it opening, which is a bright white light emanating from the outer edge of the circle, until I have a circle around me in white light on the floor. And when I seal it, instead of going clockwise, I go counterclockwise or widdershins around the circle with my wand, declaring that the circle is closed and imagining that white light on the floor around the circumference of the circle being put out. And for good measure, I also imagine an iris closing on the circle. You ever seen Stargate, where they have the iris that protects unwanted visitors from coming through the Stargate?
Closing the iris!
That's what I imagine closing up my circle at the very end of an operation. It's not entirely necessary, but it is an added layer. In my opinion, it's worth it so that I don't have to chase things around my house or have to deal with what Brandon's going through. At least not anymore. I mean, I've had experiences also, but things are pretty quiet in that regard these days as I've learned and shored up my defenses over time. One of my earliest experiences was not unsimilar to yours. I was probably 9 or 10, and a real nasty one came into my room in the middle of the night. Now, I didn't see it. I've never been really all that great at seeing spirits. I've been much better at sensing and feeling their presence. And this one, you could just feel the evil coming off of it. And of course, it was standing near my doorway to where I couldn't get out of the room. I could just stay in bed and stare at that spot in my room. Well, eventually I summoned up the courage, or enough fear, to run straight through it and out the room and wake up my parents and let them know that something's in my room. And of course, they didn't believe me. They just sent me back in there with it. Now, it didn't do anything to me other than keep me up all night. And so I thought maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe it was just me thinking something was there and not sensing it. But then it came for my parents next. Now, I didn't know about this part until recently, within the past few years, actually, because I was telling my mother about, the thing that came into my room that one night. And then she said, yeah, it came into our room not long after that, a few nights later. And apparently it grabbed my dad on the leg or something, and he jumped straight out of bed, and he could sense this evil thing down by the foot of the bed. And he started rebuking it in the name of Jesus, telling it to get out of there. And I guess it worked because it never bothered me again. It was just the one time for me, but I was the first one it came after. And, I've also had my issues with Ouija boards when I was a teen, much, much later than the encounter I just spoke of. But I've had planchettes move on their own. I've had Ouija boards threaten me, which is why I don't recommend messing with them. You never know what you're going to get coming through other than it's usually bad. And, Halloween's coming up. Maybe I should go over some of the strange and bizarre happenings that I've been witness to over the years. Now, I used to live in a small 2-bedroom townhome. It was the place before we got the house here, and we've been here about 12 years. That townhouse definitely had some spiritual issues. That's the place where I had my keys slide across the coffee table right in front of me while I was watching TV. The coffee table's between me and the TV. And my keys just slid from one end to the other all on their own. So that was a bit freaky and made me WTF, but it didn't really scare me. What scared me later was when I was talking on the phone about it to somebody that I knew, a bunch of stuff just fell off or got knocked off the bookshelf behind me and made me about jump out of my skin. And this wasn't in the same room. The key sliding across the table was in the living room downstairs. And the bookshelf, which had all kinds of things on it, books, DVDs. It was a small townhome, so the conserved space that had a little bit of everything on it was upstairs in the second bedroom, which was like the computer room. So I was facing the computer on the phone in one corner of the room, and the bookshelf was behind me in the opposite corner. And all of a sudden, there's just this big loud crash as I'm telling him about the keys sliding across the table. And at the same place on the small little patio, there was writing on the wall that was taunting me. And it wasn't like somebody spray painted it or graffitied or anything like that. No, it was just part of the wall itself. Almost like, you know how you see things when you're Matrix? You see designs and patterns and things you probably shouldn't. Except I brought it to my girlfriend's attention and asked her what she saw there. And she read the same thing. And I'll substitute my real name for Frater here. And by doing that, it would say, Frater is a bitch. Except it was my real name. And it was not long after I learned a lot of the advanced stuff, a lot of the behind the veil stuff, things that to this day I refrain from talking about because I don't want these kinds of things happening to you. I want to better people's lives. I don't want to plunge them into a waking nightmare. Now, there are some truths where ignorance is bliss. I've already talked about one subject from that time where the environment will respond to your thoughts in a type of feedback where you get knocks on the walls or clicks or pops in response to your thoughts. Now, some people can use that and be fine with it, and others it can drive them to crazy town. And that's just tip of the iceberg behind the veil stuff. Things go much deeper and darker than that, such as writing on the wall that shouldn't be there. But I am getting a bit sidetracked here. I've had disembodied hissing in my garage that I've had to chase out and banish. I've had another spirit come into my room at night here at this house, but I chased it out with love and asking it over and over about its damnation. It really didn't like that. But really, the thing you need to know about these low-level entities, these parasites, because that's what they are, is if you stop feeding them, they will go away. And I think that's a big reason why I don't have that kind of activity anymore, because they know they're not going to get a meal off of me. They feed off of your fear, and I'm just not scared of them. I know them for what they are. They're parasites. And if they're not feeding off of you, they have no reason to hang around. They're not going to want to hang around. So they have to be getting something off of you to be hanging around all that time. Now, I can be startled. I'm just as susceptible to jump scares as anyone else. But immediately after that, I'm confronting. And so there's just much easier targets than Frater for them. And the fact that I always close doors behind me, as I mentioned, and I run a pretty clean ship. These things prefer a cluttered, dirty environment. So that's what I recommend. I recommend cleaning your environment, not giving into fear with this thing. In other words, don't feed it, and do the uncrossing correctly for 7 to 13 days in a row, starting before dawn on Sunday, submerging yourself in the hyssop-infused bath water, or pouring the water over your head while reading Psalms 51 over and over, a good 7 to 13 times. After the bath, air dry, anoint yourself with uncrossing oil from feet to head, and then go in and light your candles for the candle portion of the ritual. And always keep an eye on it, especially during an uncrossing. Never leave your candles burning unattended. I've had a lot of funky things happen with candles, but especially during uncrossings. I've had candle holders explode and get glass everywhere. So always keep an eye on them. Set them on some kind of fireproof tray for good measure. A round tempered glass microwave tray is good for this purpose. But that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like or share it if you did so others can enjoy it as well. And be sure to visit mindandmagic.com for all your magical programs and courses. This is Frater Xavier, and I'll see you next time. Take care.